you giving me the opportunity to be here. Let me see if I can, how does the screen sharing work? Okay, here we go. It's like, you'd think I haven't used Zoom every day for the last year and a half whenever trying to get Zoom started. All right, can everyone see my screen? It's a slide, it should be.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I am, because of the way Keynote works with Zoom, it is difficult for me to see whether it's working properly, but I'm going to be switching back and forth a bit between slides and other windows. So just bear with me as I do that. I also mentioned earlier to, how do you pronounce your name? Is it Adonai or Adoni?
I'm on mute as usual. It's Adoni.
Okay. So Adoni, I think it was you that I was talking to on Twitter. I have to take off at 8 p.m. your time. So I'm going to try to leave room for questions. And so I'll be kind of speeding through a few things. There is some live coding in this presentation. So if there is a hiccup, I might skip over something, but feel free to ask a question if you didn't quite pick up on the concept that I was showing. As was mentioned, I am the maintainer of Ramsey UUID, which is a UUID package that I guess I launched it back in 2012. So it's been around for almost 10 years now. I am a release manager for PHP 8.1. I am the co-organizer of the Nashville PHP user group that's here in Nashville, Tennessee, in the United States. And I am a staff engineer at Skillshare. Also, I've been doing PHP development for about 20 years. So I've been around for quite a long time. As I mentioned, I'm one of the release managers for 8.1. And next week is the beta 3 release. So keep your eyes open for that. It'll come out on Thursday. And this is the last release before it goes into the release candidate stage. So we're already in feature freeze mode, which means that there are no new features that will be introduced from here on out. And it's really just kind of bug fixes and finding problems and fixing those problems between now and November. So the general availability release will be out at the end of November, beginning of December. And yeah, so if you have any questions about that, or you're interested in kind of what it takes to be a release manager, feel free to ask. I'm always willing to kind of tell about that process. And if you're interested in being a release manager for the next, minor release version, I'm happy to help give tips or tell a little bit more about what we do. But it's open to anyone. Like, you don't have to be a C guru to be a release manager. All right, so on this presentation, what we want to talk about, the presentation title is Cool Tools for PHP Development. What we're going to focus on, though, is not necessarily specific tools, but really how we use our tools. And there's a phrase that's used a lot in development these days called developer experience, or DX. And this is something that I think it's talked a lot about within the JavaScript community and other programming language communities. I haven't heard it talked a lot about it within PHP. However, excuse me, if you're a Laravel developer, I've heard the Laravel community talk a lot about developer experience. And really, developer experience is the experience you have as a developer around using the tools that you use, or around working with the team that you're working with. Back in 2012, there was a paper published that tried to define developer experience. And this was in the early days of this term, developer experience. And so what they said was, what they came to the conclusion of is that developer experience consists of experiences related to all kinds of artifacts and activities that a developer may encounter as part of their software development. I'm not going to read the rest of this, but those 3 activities basically include things involving development infrastructure, how you feel about work you're doing, and how you view the value of your contribution. And they set this up around 3 main pieces of this conceptual framework. And that's around cognition, which is how you perceive the infrastructure, conation, which is how you view the value of your contribution, and affect, which is how you feel about your work. And I think that these 3 things, when I look at these 3 tenets or pillars, I can see all sorts of things regarding open source development, regarding team development, regarding even a freelancer doing individual development. All 3 of these factors play into the jobs we do on a daily basis. So what I want to focus on, though, is the cognition part. And I think that cognition a lot of times also plays into the other 2 aspects. So we'll talk a little bit about those other 2 aspects, but really I want to talk about the tools, the infrastructure. How do you perceive the infrastructure that you're using? And I don't just mean like the servers or the Amazon or AWS platform that you use, or DigitalOcean, or whatever it is you might use in the cloud. I mean the actual software tools you might use. That's part of your infrastructure. So do your tools get in the way? Are they a joy to use? And the whole kind of concept here is that the better experience, or the hypothesis, I guess, is that the better experience a developer has with their tools, the more efficient and happy they'll be. The better they'll feel about their work, and the better they'll see the value of their contribution to the work. So we want to focus on that. How can we have better tools? How can we improve our tooling so that we feel better about the overall job? So cool tools are not just, it's not just a rhyming phrase, which is really the reason I chose it for the title, but they're the tools that you need to do your job. They're the tools that help make your job easier, and they're the tools that bring joy to your work. And when I talk about bringing joy to your work, joy can come in, that seems like a really weird thing to talk about when we're talking about programming, but it really makes a difference, I think. And joy can come in just even little things. So here's an example of a really little kind of silly, almost trivial thing, or it might really be a trivial thing, but it doesn't play into the way we do our work in a trivial way. And that is something as simple as colors in your terminal output, or emojis in your terminal output, or in your, as part of messages that you get, logging messages, maybe even. The thing here is these things kind of look a little superficial, and I guess on the surface they are, but when it really comes down to it, they're just tiny things that can make our jobs a little bit more enjoyable. And if they do, then that's kind of a net win for your overall team and for yourself. So that's kind of what I mean by, do they bring joy to your work? Something as simple as colors in your terminal output, or maybe even more complex, can bring joy to the work you do. So what we're going to do is focus on better workflows for the tools that you already use. We're going to focus on how you can share these workflows with your team. And while some of you may not be on a team, maybe you're a team of one, the ability to share a workflow across multiple projects that you might work on is going to also be beneficial. So it's not just about teams of more than one, but also teams of one. And in other words, how can you improve your developer experience? That takes us into our live coding section. So I'm going to stop sharing, switch my screen over to another window. Oh, I just realized you can share multiple windows in Zoom. That's interesting. I don't need to do that right now, but good for future reference. All right, can everyone see my terminal window?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Let me get the chat window up here so that I can see that. All right. If something, I've noticed that certain versions of Zoom will have problems when you have a window overlapping on top. If you see, if there's part of my window that you can't see, just let me know and I'll move things around to make it easier to see. All right, I have a little repository set up here, and this repository just has an initial commit in it, and it's set up. It's sort of like, think of this like one of those baking shows where they're going to show you how they bake something, but they've already got a bunch of stuff already kind of in place so that they can do it quicker. So I have some files already in here. Excuse me, don't drink a Coke just before you give a presentation. So I have files already in here, and you can see some of these. We're not going to talk about them just yet. I don't want to get into what I'm doing with these other kind of configuration files just yet. They're here mainly so that when I pull in tools in just a minute, as we talk about them, that everything kind of runs properly and you don't see big errors on the screen and I have to debug it during the talk, which I have done in the past. I'm actually going to remove, I had forgotten to do this before. I'm going to remove this lock file and the vendor directory. I don't know why it. All right. Okay, so now we've got a very simple project here. Let me show you. I just lost. Okay. I lost contact with my terminal for a second there. For some reason, it is not responding. Let me turn something off here. All right. This is weird. It's my terminal kind of freezes up. Okay. Anyway, we'll continue on and see if that keeps happening. You can see here that in the source and test directory, they're very simple. This is just a basic hello world project. And what I want to do is start incorporating the tools that I normally use on a day-to-day basis with any project that I'm working on. One of those tools is PHPUnit. Another one is PHPCS. I'm sorry, PHP Code Sniffer. A third one is PHPStan, and a fourth one is Psalm. And PHPStan and Psalm, if you're not familiar with them, are static analysis tools that help you. They essentially look at your code without running it and trace through it and try to determine whether or not there are issues based on the types and that it infers from the way your code is structured. It can also they can also determine like whether any code is dead, that is, will never be executed. So that's very helpful for you. I want to pull in these 4 tools. They're tools that I always use. So I'm going to use composer require --dev and import these tools. So now I've got these 4 tools in place, and I'm going to run them because this is what I normally do. So they're in the vendor bin directory, and I'll run PHPUnit. So that passes. Now I'm going to run PHPCS code sniffer. That's going to test my coding standards. All right, that passes. We can see 2. So it ran on my example.php script and then my example test. We'll run PHPStan. Both of these are static analyzers. They both do essentially the same thing, but they often will find different issues. So I like to use both of them. Okay, there were no static analysis errors from PHPStan and Psalm. Okay, so there were no errors found there. I expected that. I only have 2 files in my project. So I ran these 4 tools. These are tools that I have to run a lot though. So how can I group these together so that I don't have to run them all 4 at one time separately like this? And I don't also have to reach into vendor bin each time, because that's a little bit of a pain. Well, there's many different ways we can solve this problem, right? We could write a single script that does it for us. That could be a bash script. It could be a PHP script. We could write, there are a number of ways we can handle this. But what I want to do is show that we can handle this using Composer itself. So we'll open composer.json, and Composer has a concept very similar to Node or NPM package JSON. The concept is scripts. We can create our own scripts that we can then call using the Composer command to run. And it is a key value pair object that sits right in your composer.json. Each key is the name, each property name is the name of the command that you want to give it. And then the value can be a string, which could be a CLI command. It could be a PHP, the fully qualified class name and method name of a static method in a PHP class, and it will call that. Or it can be an array of those. What we're going to do is use an array. So I'm going to say test is going to be the name of my, whoops, I don't want to use object notation, array notation. Test is going to be the name of my command. And I have 4 that I'm running a lot. So I'm going to list those here. PHPCS, PHPStan, Psalm, and PHPUnit. Notice that I am not providing the full path to vendor bin because Composer knows where to find these. It knows exactly where they are. If these don't exist in vendor bin, I can't see what's going on because all right, for some reason this keeps freezing on me. It's very weird. So I have lost my train of thought now. I apologize. Oh, the Composer knows where to find these, but if you have tools that are located outside your project directory, you can also put the full path to those tools here. Or if they are in your path, it will find them in your path. So don't worry about that. So now we've created this command, and I can execute this by saying Composer run script test. And it will execute all 4 of them. I can also, as a shortcut, just say Composer test. And if that's the only command defined, it will find it and execute it. So now I have my Composer test command that I can run after every single thing, every change I make. And I can be fairly certain that everything's going to pass. I can catch things early without having to send them up to catch them in my continuous integration suite. But there's a problem with it. And the other thing that I want to make sure is very clear here is they're in my Composer JSON, so I commit them to my repository, which means that anyone else using this repository is able to use these commands. Whenever they clone the repository, the commands are available to them. And if you do Composer list, it shows you a list of commands. And now my command that I created is listed here. So it runs the test script. I can also actually, this is an interesting thing. If I want to be very helpful to my team, I can add another property here called, I'm having to look this up right off the bat because I forgot what it's called. It's there's scripts, and then there is custom descriptions for, scripts dash descriptions. let's say our team's normal test workflow. And now when I type composer list, I see that description instead of the default. It says our team's normal workflow. So you're able to add a whole bunch of different commands here. You can give them helpful messages so that your team can do composer list and see the commands they have access to. You can also do this other thing where you namespace them. And so I'll show you that real quick. So namespacing them is just using this colon. And we'll say, whoops, I want to do it at the beginning. Team. And now if I do composer list, I see that namespace down here with a command under it. Another very helpful thing is I can list just the namespace. So if I say composer list team, I see all the commands available within that namespace. So now you can get an idea of the power that you have with composer scripts to share a lot of common things with your team, to make it helpful and useful for your team to use, to share among them within the same project. But let's say we use a lot of the same commands across projects, and we have a lot of different repositories. Well, one thing we can do is take these composer scripts and copy paste them to the composer JSON in each project. However, that can get cumbersome. And if we want to make a change to the way our workflow works across all our projects, we have to go update them all. So that takes us, actually, I've got someone raising their hand. So go ahead and ask your question. Oh, that's Matthew Turlin. Hi, Matthew.
I think that was my fault
you were.
because I asked who else didn't know about composer namespace.
I saw raise his
Right.
hand, so I wasn't sure. Yes, these namespaces actually are common if you're familiar with Symfony console commands. This is using Symfony console commands under the hood. So anything you can do with the Symfony console command, you can do with a composer command. Actually, we'll get a little bit more into that because our next thing we want to talk about is composer plugins. So we're able to share, like create these commands within our project, but if we want to share them across projects in a way that we can keep them centralized and update them regularly, and then all of our projects take advantage of them, we can create our own composer plugin that we use as a team and then import that as a development requirement across all of our projects. So let's take a look at that. I want to actually use a plugin I created as the example. And this plugin is called Composer Reple. If my console will update, all right. So Ramsey /composer-Reple is a composer plugin. I am using it for the sake of example. It doesn't do anything super special, except it provides a REPL that you can access directly from Composer. Now, a REPL is REPL. It stands for Read, Eval, Print, Loop. It is a language shell. It allows you to type language commands into it from your terminal, and then it'll execute it as part of, like, as if you were running a language script. Read, eval, print, loop means it reads the input that you give it, it evaluates it, it prints it out, prints out the result, and then loops back around to wait for more input. That's what that means. So I've got, I didn't do anything super special with this. I'm just importing SciShell, which is also the REPL that Laravel Tinker uses under the hood. I believe the Cake PHP project has a built-in REPL that uses SciShell as well. So if I type Composer REPL, it brings up the REPL. And as I was mentioning, you can do things like assign variables here and echo them, for example. Oops. So it's a language shell. super helpful. The really cool thing about this, especially this integration, is that it now has the context of your project available in it. So this is one reason why I would promote this, because I'm doing self-promotion here. I like this because not only am I using SciShell, but it also has my entire project's context imported into it. So it knows about my classes. So the example that I have in example.sort PHP looks like this, and it has a greet method. I can open up this Reple. And the other reason I'm showing this is not just for self-promotion, but to show you what you can do with a Composer plugin. You can have access to your Composer environment or to your project environment from within the plugin, so that you can do any number of things that you need to do that would be helpful for your project. So if I create an example variable and say new Ramsey, I think it was tools was my namespace. So now I have an object that's example, and I can say example greet, and I'll say PHPMiNDS. And I cannot see what my console's typing because it's way behind. Oh, I put 2 S's in there by accident, sorry. So yeah, so we have access to the context of my application, to my project. And that's what's super helpful about a plugin. So what I want to do now, though, is dig a little deeper into that plugin. Before I do that, I want to show, if I do composer list, you'll see the Reple command is available here in the list. So that's something you can do with your plugin. You're able to list them, their commands, as part of your composer list of commands. So let's take a look at what it takes to build a plugin. Share a different window here. So I'm using the same project, composer-reple, to basically just kind of walk through the code a little bit. I don't need to show, I'm not going to show you how the Reple code works. I wanted to show you how the plugin part works, because that's the part that's interesting for this talk. And this is the part that's going to help you a lot with your sharing, your common workflow commands on your team. So we'll take a look at the source directory, go into Composer. As I was mentioning, these are just Symfony console commands. They extend a Composer command, but that Composer command extends Symfony console command. If we look at Reple plugin, this is really where all the magic is. We tell our plugin that it's implementing these, in my case, it's implementing 3 Composer interfaces. You don't have to implement all 3 of these, but they are super helpful. So one is that we're going to tell Composer what this plugin is capable of. In telling it what it's capable of, down here, we tell it that it is a command provider. That's a capability it provides. So I'm also using the same class to form that, to be that command provider. And then this is also implementing plugin interface because it's a plugin. So I'm doing all 3 of these things on one class, could technically be 3 different classes. So it's a command provider, and these are the commands it provides. I'm only providing one command. Again, it is a Symfony console command. And then these 3 methods are just part of the plugin interface. And what I am doing here is when you activate it, you do get access to both Composer and the IO interface. So I'm taking that Composer instance and setting it on this class so that I am able to access that from within the plugin later. And so this Reple command actually makes use of that. It makes use of the Composer instance so that it has access to Composer configuration values and so forth. So I'm saying all this to make sure that you're aware that you've got access to this wide amount of information coming from Composer, including your own composer.json. So you're able to take a plugin and put things into composer.json that help configure your plugin. So I want to show a little bit more about that. So this is basically it. This is how you create a plugin. There are two more things that you have to be aware of to create the plugin, and those are in composer.json. The first thing is your type has to be composer plugin right here. And then under this extra property, we tell it the composer class or the plugin class. So this is saying the plugin class. Now you can see in here, I've got several other things going on. And the idea here though, is that this is configuration that I'm providing to plugins. We'll take a quick look at that now. I have another library called Devtools. And this is something that I use to share all of my common workflow scripts. This is what I like to do for all of my projects. I have a bunch of open source projects. All of them they use the plugin part of this, which is very simple. Devtools is a plugin, and you'll see there's no source directory here, and it requires Devtools lib. And the reason I've done this is so that you could take Devtools lib and actually extend it, whereas you can't really extend a Composer plugin package, just due to the way that Composer kind of works. So this is everything that's under the hood for the Composer plugin that I have, that I like to use for all my projects. In here, I have a lot of commands. These are all Composer commands. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but I want to show you kind of how this works. So let me go back to the console. And the reason I'm showing this is really just to give ideas about what you might, what kind of things you might do with your for your team. So I want to require this. Whoops. And you're going to see some interesting here with another tool in a minute called CaptainHook. But I'm just going to, oh, it didn't, okay, that's cool. It didn't prompt me like I thought it was going to. Oh, I know why it didn't. Okay. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling. So I have included my my plugin here, and this is the plugin that has all my stuff on it. If I type composer list, we now see a lot of extra commands. These are also sub namespace themselves, but I have several others that aren't namespace and they appear up here. As part of the configuration for this package, I've created something that allows me to even further sub namespace it so that my team can easily find the commands. So I don't have an extra section in here yet. I'm going to add an extra section or an extra property. And within it, I'm going to set a command prefix. This is a property that I created for the for this Devtools library. And the idea here, though, is that because you have access to the context to Composer in your plugin, you can access things that are in composer.json, which is what I'm doing with the plugin right here. Command prefix is my own configuration name. I gave it that, but you can create any kind of configuration you want with your plugins. If I do composer list dev now, it gives me everything within that dev namespace. So I've got all these commands, and I've even, here I'm going to get rid of the test. Actually, I've got it called team test now, so I don't have to get rid of it. There's not going to be any collision. So if I run composer dev test all, it's going to run all those same 4 things that I just set up to run. But now it's in a plugin that I'm able to share across all my repositories. And since I'm doing pretty much the same thing each time, I'm able to make to kind of like have a DRY, don't repeat yourself model here. I've also further given the ability to extend my my plugin here, again, all through access to the composer.json. Whoops. Let's see if I can get the example here. So with that test all command, I've also aliased it to just test, but within that, or with like maybe it doesn't do everything I want it to do on this particular project. So I have the ability through the configuration here to modify the commands that I've set up. And so I can say, all right, whoops, I don't want to prefix it with my command prefix because it doesn't understand that. So I'm going to say test all also is going to run a script as part of it, and it'll just say echo. Come on, we'll do something very simple and just say echo path if I can get it to work. I can't see what I'm typing. All right. So now if I run, we'll just say composer test because I've aliased it. Oops. I do this all the time. For some reason, I can't do JSON live coding. It's just impossible for me. So, oh, I forgot a comma. All right, so it's going to run those commands, and at the end, it echoed path, right? So I was able to modify it using configuration. So when you write a Composer plugin, you have access to the configuration, and so if you're creating commands that you're going to share across your projects, you're also able to do custom things with them. So if one project does something differently, just a little bit, you can use the configuration within your composer.json for that project to, modify your plugin. And in that way, you're able to give your plugin extra information so that you don't have to do all weird sorts of custom things within the plugin to like with weird if statements that says, if I'm in this project, do this thing. If I'm in this project, do this other thing. So the idea here is that you're able to configure it. All right. So now that takes me kind of to the next thing though. So I've got my commands that I want to share with my team. I've got commands that I want to share across all of our repositories. These are the workflows that we always implement. I can use these same commands within my CI environment to run automatically. But what if I want my developers to always run them and I want to just kind of enforce that? Well, there's a way we can do that. We can do that using Git Hooks. We can make sure that our team, when they clone a repository, that certain hooks are installed, like a pre-commit hook, so that when they make a commit, then it automatically runs some tests for them. Or when they push to the repository, it automatically runs some tests and then blocks them from pushing it. Now, you might wonder why you would want to do this because it's going to run in CI anyway. Well, sometimes in CI environments that I've dealt with, it might be 20 minutes or 30 minutes before you come back with a result. It's just kind of the nature of some really large projects where you might have to wait that long. And that's a long time to wait for a developer to figure out that they missed a comma somewhere because of your coding standards and so forth. So it's better to have them run the test locally first before pushing it so that they can catch those mistakes before they have to wait for CI to run. CI is always your last wall. You have to have that running because you can always get around a Git hook. You can turn them off locally. You can use -n and it won't, like with git commit, and it won't run the pre-commit hook, for example. So developers can do that, but there is a way that we can help our team stay on the same page by enforcing the workflows that we want to have, and yet still be flexible for them. So let's talk about that. The tool that I want to use for that is called CaptainHook. CaptainHook is a PHP project that helps us set up Git hooks. And so we're going to take a quick look at that. Let's see. I think I may have left something out here. Okay, so CaptainHook has a plugin, a Composer plugin. Speaking of Composer plugins, we're going to install that plugin. I believe my Devtools library also includes it, so it may already be installed, in which case it is. And oh, I know why. CaptainHook thinks that the things are already installed because I used the same checkout for a previous version of this talk. So let me do this. And then now, come on. Now when I require it, it's going to ask me to install it. Yeah. So I'll say yes to all of these. Now there's another cool thing that we can do though. I'm kind of getting a little bit ahead of myself, but because I haven't even shown how CaptainHook works yet. But there's some more configuration we can add here on our project. In the root Composer JSON file of a project, we can force CaptainHook plugins to install. And so our team doesn't have to bother checking yes to each of those. Come on. I don't know why this is doing this. It's like I'm not using a remote terminal. It's all local. It's just Zoom is slowing down my terminal somehow. All right, so oh, I didn't even talk about what I was doing. So CaptainHook's plugin has this configuration option called force install. If we put this in our root composer.json, then whenever anyone clones the repository, it'll automatically install the plugin. So you saw me click yes at each of these questions just above to install the hooks. Well, now if I remove the hooks and rerun the plugin installation, it picks that up and it just installs them all automatically. So if you have this in your composer.json, then whenever anyone clones your repository, they automatically get installed and configured for that person. So this can be really helpful for your team if you're sharing these. Now let's take a look at CaptainHook.json. This is where all the configuration is for CaptainHook. So now we are able to set up configuration that enforces our workflow. So within this workflow, let's say I want to enforce a certain type of commit message for my team, and I'm going to use what's called beams. I think the author of a blog post named Chris Beams came up with this kind of philosophy of how to write a commit message. And so CaptainHook already has an action to help us with that. So I've got that here. I also have a pre-commit hook, and all it's doing right now is saying echo hello, hello. So let's just, let's see, I've got some stuff in here to commit. Let's add my, let's add what I've got in composer.json. Let's see what I've got here. Yeah, I'll stage that and do a commit. Okay, so it ran my pre-commit hook. You barely saw it because it was so quick, but it echoed hello or hello. So we'll look at that in just a minute. But now I am going to type in a commit message. So I'll say updated stuff. It's gonna fail because this does not follow the Beams philosophy of commit messages. And in fact, it prints out an error message telling me why. So there's two reasons. The subject line has to start with an uppercase letter, and it needs to use the imperative mood. I'm not going to get into what the imperative mood means, but really it's an action statement. So it's like update all the things instead of updated the things. So it's a present tense action verb, essentially. And you can see up here it failed. And you can also see my pre-commit hook that just says echo, hello. It actually didn't print out the hello, I don't believe. There's another reason behind that. CaptainHook's going to try to like not print out a bunch of the logging information unless it has to. So on the commit message, it fails, so it prints out the logging information. If my hello world or hello message had failed, you'd see hello echoed to the screen. But since it passed, it had a 0 exit command. It was successful, and as a result, it just says done here. It didn't print it out. All right, let's commit with a proper message, or with at least one that passes the validation. Update stuff. And so we see done, done, and that's good. Now, I want to enforce my workflow through the commit hooks. So I'm going to do that. So with the pre-commit hook, we just say echo hello right now. Let's get rid of that one. That's not important. That's just an example. I have several other things I'm going to pull in over here that I want to run. Actually, let me grab them from a different place. Sorry, I just changed my mind about what I was going to pull in. All right, this is going to be a little complicated looking, but I want to explain why I'm doing this with CaptainHook. Let me paste it. I pasted something that had an I come out here. I don't like that. All right, so there are 4 actions I'm taking. One is to validate Composer. And CaptainHook allows us to specify conditions. And there are some, I've seen this in several other Git commit or Git hook libraries where you're able to specify a condition. And this condition in this particular case, the condition is saying if any of the files that are staged is composer.json, then let's run composer validate. Otherwise, we're not going to run composer validate. The same thing goes with composer normalize. And I'm doing a dry run here so that it doesn't actually make changes to the file. The next things are I want to, run my coding standards. I'm sorry, this isn't running coding standards. This is checking for syntax errors, but I only want to do it on the PHP files that are staged. So that's what this is doing. And this. So this is saying, well, actually the condition is saying only run this action if there are PHP files that are staged. And then this is passing only those PHP files to the command. The same thing is going on down here where I'm checking for my style. So the reason I'm not running just composer test across all the things is because I'm going to try to limit it to just the files that are staged. And that way, I'm not having to run it across my entire code base. And this can save me some time, especially in a pre-commit hook. Now, when I push, I might want to run everything. So with pre-push, I'm going to go down here. Let's see where pre-push is. Whoops. And I'm going to set an action here, and that action will just be composer test. So now it's going to run all my tests when I try to push to the remote repository. So that'll also include static analysis. One of the reasons I'm not including static analysis in the pre-commit hook is especially because I'm not using it just on staged files, is because static analysis tools get really finicky when you decide only to run them against a specific file, because they kind of lose context to the overall project, and you can get some weird responses. So I would advocate for running your static analysis in your pre-push, but maybe not necessarily in pre-commit unless you're running it on the entire project. All right, so I'm gonna just show this working real quick, and then we'll wrap up here because I'm going to run out of time. So I want to make a change to my example file here, and we're just going to make a change that I know is a style error. I'm just going to move my curly brace up here, and then I'm going to add that. Actually, I want to add all this too, but yeah, we'll add all that, and then we'll add this. Now, when I go to commit, it's going to run the pre-commit hook first and fail because I have a style error. You'll see, though, it skips the composer validate and composer normalize runs because I didn't make any changes to composer in this commit. There's none staged. My syntax passes, but my coding standards fail. And then I get the output that tells me why. So I can run with my Devtools plugin. I have a dev lint fix command that will automatically fix some of these. So that fixes it. Now I'm going to add that fix. Everything passes, and I can say add CaptainHook configuration, if I can spell. All right, so that works. I'm not going to do a push because I don't want to push this to a remote repository. But if I did do a push, it would run the test against the entire code base and so forth, just like we set up. Now, so we've taken a look. Let me stop sharing and go back to my slides. Am I sharing? Oh, no, I'm not sharing. Now I'm sharing. All right, so what have we covered? Well, there are 3 things that I wanted to cover in this talk that I really wanted to impress on you. And those are, we can use composer scripts to stitch together common workflows that we want to share with our team or contributors within a single repository. Across multiple repositories, we can make use of a composer plugin to combine these workflows into commands that can be shared across multiple projects. And then lastly, we can use Git Hooks using a tool like CaptainHook to ensure that everybody gets these tools as built into part of their workflow when they're working locally, that the test run, that the style commands run, the syntax commands run, and make sure that everyone is on the same page so that they can get their jobs done quicker and more effectively before they even make a push to the repository. So I've got links to the 3 places you can find out more about these 3 things. But also I want to, and I'll be giving a link to you later, or I'll give a link to your leaders for these slides where you can download them and then get all of these links. There are a lot of cool tools out there that you can build into your process like this. I'm going to show a few of them right here, but I'm not going to talk in depth about them because I want to open up to questions. I asked on Twitter a few weeks ago, or maybe a month or so ago now, for people to share cool tools that they felt were important and a necessary part of their development workflows. I got a bunch. So these slides list all of them. There are 3 slides that I just went through, and they have links to all of them. So I'm not going to talk through these, but download this and get find some time to just take a look through these and see if any of them are interesting to you and maybe even helpful. There's many more at packages.org. I mentioned that when you're making a plugin, the composer type property needs to be set to composer-plugin. You can search packages for composer-plugin projects. So you can find all the composer plugins you want to find and see what they do and see if they make sense for your workflow. Maybe someone's already provided the thing that you need for your team. That's great. You don't have to go build that. Just go require that plugin, and now it's part of your composer tooling. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see Zoom and see your questions in the chat. I will try to go through there. And again, I'll share these slides later so that you have access to them. So let's see what all right. So yes, composer namespaces are a very cool thing. I thought I saw other questions, but maybe my chat window is hiding them.
I don't know. Does anybody have any questions for Ben? Really cool. Thank you for that. Everybody's blown away. Everybody's frantically looking at their composer files now and going, oh, I could have this, I could do that.
Do you have an example repository where you've got most of these things set up we could learn from? By learn, I mean steal.
Yes, actually. Thank you for asking. Give me 1 second here. I'll paste a link in the chat. I created for myself mainly, but then I expanded it so that anyone else can really use it. I created a composer tool called PHP Library Starter Kit. You can use the create project command on Composer to download this to create a brand new project. And it'll ask you several questions. And then when you're done answering the questions, it's given you a repository that has basically everything set up with a bare bones package ready to go, with GitHub Actions included in it, with CaptainHook, with my Devtools library, and all of that kind of just ready to go. And also, if you look at just the code in this repository, you can see kind of how the CaptainHook.json set up and all of that.
Great, thank you.
Do we have another question?
Let's see, any tools for scanning multiple local composer files repos for library installations? Had a problem where a library vulnerability was found, manually searched 50+ code bases for outdated library. There is a composer tool that I would recommend for that. There's several. The one that I use a lot is, let me see if I can find this real quick to paste the link here. It is, I believe Rove created it. Yes, Rove Security Advisories. It's actually, so you would have to include this package on all of your projects, but then afterwards, when you're doing like a composer install or composer update, this package will then kick in and let you know if one of the packages you're currently using has a security vulnerability reported in it. What it does essentially, and there's nothing super special about it. If you go to its project page and look at the composer.json, you can see what it does. It has the conflict section filled out and a whole bunch of packages with all the versions that it wants to tell Composer not to install. So it just uses the conflict section as a way to reject a package being installed of a particular version. I think that's a really smart way of doing it, but they keep it updated regularly. And it will fail installation if your Composer lock file or Composer JSON is trying to require a version that is listed here as conflicted. The tree command, yes, it's yeah, you can install it with Homebrew, or there's Linux packages for it too if you're on Linux. Thanks, Richard. I love the tree command. It's like a cool little command.
So I'm intrigued. It's maybe slightly different, but you said your terminal's cool, and that's a nice developer experience. Are you using ZSH or?
I am using ZSH, but I also am using something called Starship, which is a cross-shell prompt. And I'm using,
Nice.
right, Starship provides all that integration. So that Git integration you saw, the PHP version, all of that just is out of the box, came with Starship.
Very nice. Yeah, it was a PHP integration that I want, because so many times I go to do something for work and realize I'm actually on PHP 8 and we're still not. You.
Anything else?
Thank you.
What kinds of commands are you thinking of implementing now? Anyone got a command they want to share that they've just like an idea that came up that you now are going to go implement?
I'm not sure about a new idea, but I've been using composer scripts for different projects, and being able to pull them in instead of copying and pasting them on every project through a plugin. That's that's brilliant. So yeah, that's the first thing I'll be doing. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That Reple caught my interest. I'll play around with that.
I like that a lot. I used to just always write like a one-off script to do some testing, and it might be like sitting in my project root called test.php or foo.php, and then I have to go like require once the vendor auto load at the top of it. So that saved me a lot of time. Just kind of, I'll open up the REPL and start typing what I want to test real quick.
I'm definitely thinking of using CaptainHook now for a vulnerability checker I'm rolling out.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, we're rolling out that. So actually help save time and effort for people to install hooks.
Oh yeah, Matthew pointed out this tool. I haven't looked at it in deep, but it is part of the list of tools that I have in my slides, called Defend, spelled with a PHP in the middle instead of an F. Detect flaws in your architecture before they drag you down into the depths of dependency hell.
Interesting.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure to be here. I enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot. And if you didn't learn a lot, I hope you just at least learned like one thing that would really help save you time. That's my goal. And but I've got to run now. And I'm on Twitter at Ramsey. You can always hit me up there and ask a question, or shoot me an email, ben@benramsey.com. And I'll be happy to try to answer any questions.